All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Wapiti Wednesday Live Q&A for October 9th. This is going to be a season recap. So, for starters, yes, we were allowed to go into the closure area and get our trailers and everything out of there. Um, our long hunt was starting on Friday the 20th, and Thursday the 19th, man, I was calling Forest Service, BLM, Gem County Sheriff, Valley County Sheriff. Finally got a hold of somebody. We got permission, but the only stipulation is we had to be there first thing Friday morning. So headed up, yanked camp. Bad part is our whole hunt area stayed in the closure, and they finally lifted the closure at 6 o'clock on September 30th, which was the last day of season, which actually was a Monday. We were back in town. But we we did a lot of fishing. Really covered a lot of miles, a lot of areas, and it was kind of a blessing that this closure happened because we ended up there was a little area, a little sliver that we've hunted a little bit, and we kind of ended up hunting there a bunch and learned a lot more. That little sliver, when you look at it on the map, actually had a lot more territory and a good number of elk in it. So let's see, that was Friday the 20th, 21st, 22nd. Monday the 23rd, I called in a 6x7 to 15 yards for Brandon. He dumped him on the ground, punched that tag. And then Tuesday, when Brandon ran his bull to town, Bryce and I went back into that area, just came in from a different direction. And I called in a 6x6 to 18 yards for Bryce. Only problem is Bryce had a bow malfunction. For some reason, his bow bound up that he could only draw it halfway. In fact, he went to draw, and hold on, we're letting somebody else in here real quick. So, but yeah, so Bryce went to draw, and it was crazy because we worked up this little soft ridge that went up a little bit and then benched, went up a little bit and benched, and so I would do a little bit of calling on those benches, and we got up onto the third bench and rolled over to the edge, and I did a couple of cow calls and then a bugle into this draw, and I looked to my left, and here's this muddied up 6x6 at 75, 80 yards, just staring at Bryce and I, and we're standing out in the open. And that dude just proceeded to walk around some trees and just head our direction. As soon as his eyes were blocked, I kind of dropped off the backside a little bit, and Bryce dropped down to his knees. But yeah, so that bull starts walking behind a big tamarack, and Bryce goes to draw, and he couldn't get it past halfway. His bow bound up for some reason, and here's that bull at 18 yards broadside, and Bryce couldn't draw. And I thought he stopped drawing. I didn't know I thought he stopped drawing because maybe the bull saw him or something. So I dropped off a little bit farther back, or maybe I was thinking the bull stopped, and so I dropped off a little bit farther back. And then I hear Bryce's bow kind of go off, and then I hear an arrow smack into a tree, and I go walking up there, and he was livid. He told me the bull came up, he was drawn, the bow bound, and he let down, and then he went to draw again, and he was pulling so hard trying to get this to full draw that the spring let loose in his release and cooked that arrow up into the trees. And um so yeah, just a freak on that. But we were into elk and we were into bugles every day of the hunt, even though we couldn't get into our normal hunt area because it was closed because of the fire closure. But we covered, we had some other areas on the map that you know we had kind of camped out a little bit during the summer, and it was like, okay, let's check this out, let's check that out. And man, one area we went into, there was not a single camping spot open. There was people all over the place. And I imagine that part of it was because of that fire closure, because they really extended the fire closure into a very large area. And so I think it dispersed a lot of people. And then another area, um, and in fact, it was Tuesday morning when Brandon took his bull down. We took the motorcycles, the electric motorcycles, and hit a trail, and we got back into, I mean, some incredible country. I mean, here's creek drainages, here's these big rock outcroppings and crags and pines, and I mean, just pristine looking elk country. And I'm bugling, and we'd ride, I'd bugle, we'd ride, I'd bugle, we'd ride. And finally, we cross this little creek and we finally catch a fresh elk track. And it's like, okay, finally. I said, well, let's ride up to the ridge and we'll bugle up there. And God dang it, as soon as we got up onto the top of the ridge, because the fresh elk track was down by the creek, and as soon as we got up on top of the ridge, there was a fresh wolf track. And it's like, well, now we know why there's no elk in here. There was a pack of wolves running in there. But so, I mean, it did force us into new country to check as contingency plans, which we had kind of marked these as some possible contingency plans. But yeah, we quickly crossed those off the list. Um, the one little area that we did kind of focus on, like I said, we've been in there hunting just a little bit, kind of like short little evening hunts, but it forced us to expand more. And cool thing is, we were forced to go into a drainage, a little drawback in there that I've had marked on my map as a potential area. And good Lord, the rubs, the bulls, the wallows. I mean, it was just incredible. But yeah, there was one morning we went back in there, and we had kind of called that bench 6 point bench, and I had kind of snuck over the evening before because it showed that there was a head of a creek, and man, there's just this thick chaparral, but you could see that it was hollow in the middle, and you could hear elk moving through the chaparral. And I said, I'll bet you there's a wallow in there too. But we went back in there the next morning. We were going to set up and wait for these guys to come back in, because that 6 point, that muddied 6 point, he did the same thing to us the next day too, where I'm standing there, and I just let a little cow call. We're on an old road, and all of a sudden I hear the tink tink of antlers, and I look down through the buckbrush on the other side, and I could see his legs. He just, both times he just came in that stinking quick, and it's like, you little wanker. So, but we got a bull that rolled in and started bugling, so we kind of jumped over to the other side and tried to get on him. And we learned very quickly there's a reason why he is where he is, and that's because there's just so much buckbrush and thick brush that you can't even get to him. He just beds down in these little timber pockets, in the middle of all that brush. But we rolled out of there, came up and popped up on this knob, and we're like, okay, let's just set the hammocks out and get some rest, and then we'll pop down onto 6 point bench for the evening hunt. We hadn't been in the hammock 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden, all heck breaks loose. and I pop out of my hammock, and I mean I was kind of sitting there just kind of doing some stuff on the phone, looking at maps, and um, all this commotion took was 20 yards from us, and so I walk over to it. There was three elk that were walking that trail from the backside right towards where we had the hammocks because they wanted to bed down in the little timber right there. Bryce slept through the whole thing, didn't even know what was going on. I mean, I grabbed my bow and nocked an arrow when I headed over there. He didn't even wake up until I started calling because I could hear them milling around down below us. All they saw was Bryce's black hammock. They didn't see us, they didn't smell us, just so it was a good 10 days. Like I said, we were in elk every day. We heard bugles every day. But sometimes when hunting new areas, not knowing where they're coming from or patterns or anything like that, I mean, we just got busted a few times. Liz came up the last weekend. Um, got a bull that was let's see, Friday night. Got a bull that was bugling coming off, but it just got too dark before he made his way to us. And then Saturday, we working on a place on the edge of private property, and I pulled the bull off of the private property. The only thing is we didn't know he came off the property. This is a smart old bull that he came up. We heard him coming up the backside, but then we just never saw him. And what he did is there was some chaparral brush that he came up on the backside of that and looped right around and then peered through kind of a thinner chaparral to where he could see down, and he was watching me down on the bottom work back and forth calling, and he was 35, 40 yards from Liz, but she had no clue that he was there because once you get up on top of this ridge, it's just all grass. We didn't find it until later when we kind of walked over there to peer over, and we saw the fresh tracks, and we followed the fresh tracks right to where he was sitting there watching me. And dang it, that sucker sat there and peed and pooped right when he was watching me. So add insult to injury, he peed and pooped on me while he was watching me. So, but and Jim, good evening. Yeah, you missed me saying that on Monday the 23rd. I called in a 6x7 to Brandon at 15 yards, and he punched him on the ground.
Ooh.
The thing is when Brandon got back to camp Wednesday, his attitude was okay. Thursday, by Friday, he was done. And you could tell by his calling, there was just no emotion, no excitement. And in fact, he walked off the hill Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, evening, and left Liz and I on the mountainside. And we were only going to go out for a morning hunt and hunt that area in the morning, and then we're going to switch. So I didn't even take any food. And I'm up there on 6 Point bench. Bryce and Brandon are gone. And I'm sitting there with Liz. And I said, well, babe, I said, I don't have a ton of energy because I haven't eaten anything all day long. And I said, but we'll get a bull off the mountain. So she was out of water, and she just kind of made the call about 6 o'clock, and was like, no, I'm out of water. You have no food. Let's roll off the mountain. So we roll off the mountain and went back to camp, and then came home the next morning. We're heading up Friday for a spike hunt, and I have gotten reports that they're still bugling. So there is still bugling and running activity going. Now, the one thing during the 10-day hunt that I really noticed had to be all the reactions that I was getting was from very soft cow calls. And I would put my hand on the end of the bugle just to really muffle it and tone it down. And in fact, I think it was Thursday or Friday. I think it was Friday morning because we did a morning hunt, and then we rolled back to camp to get Liz and go out on an evening. But Brandon was using the bomb, the grunt tube from Born and Raised Outdoors that won this year's grunt tube challenge, and he was like, "Oh, I need a different tube." And I'm like, why? He goes, this one's just too loud. I was like, really? Let me see it. And so I took the tube and I put my hand on and I just did really light air pressure and just nice and soft. And then I tossed it at him. And I was like, learn some freaking control on your diaphragm reed. And I mean, I was getting a little perturbed about his attitude because as soon as he punched his tag, it's like his whole demeanor changed. It was like, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to kind of half-ass it, through here. And so we kind of decided that he's not shooting first next year. He's going to be the last one to shoot just because his attitude kind of dwindled a little bit. So, but no, all in all, so full on season recap. In elk, herd elk every single day. I know for a fact that with all the work we put in this summer with trail cameras and stuff, if they had not closed our area, we most definitely would have been 100% tag out. I mean, we should have had at least three of the four. I mean, Liz needed that one more step the second weekend at 9 yards. Bryce's bow malfunction at 18 yards. I mean, both those are just, chip shots. But I mean, that's elk hunting. We had opportunities. Um, Brandon did call in a spike for me. Um, I had a shot at 35 yards, just didn't take it. He ended up coming at 8 yards, but he came from a different direction. There were some branches kind of hanging down. I think that was Wednesday morning. So, but so all in all, everybody had shot opportunities. Some people had more than one shot opportunity, but the reeds I primarily called on the black ice and the stratum from Riven now that I've had time to really run those reeds. Really, really like them. Those are now my favorite reeds. The controllability, the ease of use, the tonal quality. Um, Very, very impressed with those two reads. So for those of you that want, it's Hunt Riven, and they are conventional reads. They are on a wide frame, but it's the black ice and the stratum. Yeah, those are my new go-to read. Started getting some ideas for because Bryce and I were still using the antagonizer from Mile High Note game calls. That's our go-to grunt tube. Um, Started kind of designing in my mind kind of a mouthpiece that will clip onto those to give more of a flared end. So I need to connect with somebody here in the Boise area that has a 3D printer, print some of those up and start playing with them. So might start the process of coming out with a full-blown ECA tube. So I don't know if I want to spend the money on a mold injection and really get into tubes and calls, but hey, we'll see what happens. At a minimum, maybe I'll just buy a 3D printer and print a bunch of those snap-on mouthpieces so people can go buy the antagonizer and then just buy this mouthpiece to clip on. So Sandy, how did your hunt end? Obviously, the fact that you were talking about getting elk from a coworker, I'm gonna say no dice.
No dice. The last 2 days of season, I found a hell of a wallow. Elk all in there, but just couldn't find any spikes. Um, I may sit that wallow next year. It's about 300 foot of elevation change from the nearest road, so it'll keep a lot of the hunters out of there. really dark timber with a creek in the area, but the wind changes every 5 minutes down there. So you can't depend on the weather at all.
We had that happen one day. We were in this area and this new area, and actually it was the next morning after the first encounter with the muddied up bull, and we kind of we knew there was an old road, and so we went to 6 Point Bench, jumped on the old road and went down. And we ended up finding a really good elk trail that went down to a creek crossing. You can tell they were watering there. And so I sat on that water, and Bryce went upstream a little bit and found a wallow that had wild onions around it. So
So his breath was great the rest of the day.
he didn't eat the wild onions, but man, I'll tell you what, sitting there smelling those wild onions, man, it makes you think you're at a barbecue and the burgers are about ready to come off the grill. You kind of go through your food pretty dang quick, but we sat there from about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, okay, midday. Weather was definitely a lot warmer than what was anticipating. It was about 10 to 15 degrees above seasonal average. But that's why we were like, okay, they're going to get up and either come to water or come to wallow. And of course, Brandon was tagged out, so he was sitting kind of back in some dark timber back up behind us. But same thing, wind was squirrely, squirrely, and at about 6 o'clock, we hear elk coming down the ridge. There's a group heading towards my water hole, and then all of a sudden, just again, all heck breaks loose. Well, come to find out, there was an elk that was coming into his wallow that was right there getting ready to step out, and then with the wind swirling, they just busted, and that one rolled over and took my group out. And I had a good wind, but yeah. So we sat there from 9:30, 10 o'clock, almost 8 hours. Didn't put the hammocks out, just kind of sat there. And then that's when we were walking back out the road that got up top, and I let those mews go, and that muddied 6 Point just came rolling in really quick again on the other side of the brush up top. But yeah, with swirling winds, the best thing to do, Sandy, is tree stand it.
Yeah,
It
it's kind of what I was figuring.
Yeah, it
But
gets you up high enough that you really don't have to worry about it. The other thing that you can do, and I've done this in the past too, is take elk urine and
mm,
just spray it on a bunch of trees around you. And I mean, spray it. Coat those trees. So basically, what you're doing is you're basically putting a circle of elk urine around you, and you want to do it heavy enough. If you can find a gel, it's going to stick better and last longer. But at least that might help mask your scent a little bit if you're on the ground. And I have done that in the past to kind of mask my stinkiness.
yeah, I did try that the first day when I found that wall. I found it about, I don't know, 11 o'clock or so, and stayed there till dark. But I had one of the little mist bottles of Elkin estrus and sprayed that around the area because I kind of set up a little ground blind, so to speak. And by the time I got it set up, the wind was blowing exactly the way I didn't want. So I moved and tried again, and then by the time it was set up, it was going the other way.
Going the other way, so you went back to where you were the first time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
But I did spray that down around a bit, hoping it'd help.
have been there to where you kind of feel like a ping pong ball going over to here, over to there, over to here, over to there. Yeah, yeah, have been there. So, um, another another product that tested was the hollow, the alpaca socks. Those things are money. So they're antimicrobial. I did a test. So they sent me two pairs and sent Liz two pairs. I wore the first pair for 4 days, and then I wore the second pair for 4 days, just because I wanted to see if the comfort would stay and if they would get stinky. They never got stinky. But
Man,
I
that's a
just,
test too.
what's that?
That's a test.
Especially when it's 80 degrees,
Oh
75,
yeah.
80 degrees and you're hiking. Yeah. I know I took that first pair off at the end of day 4 and I kind of sniffed them and I'm like, I can't bring myself to wear them for a fifth day.
No, you just gotta lean, stand him in the corner, in the RV, just stand him
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. So, but no, really, really, really comfortable. Um, heat regulation, my feet never got sweaty. When it was cool in the mornings, my feet didn't get cold. Was really, really impressed with these. And I got, because they make an ankle sock, a crew, and a boot. And I just had them send crew, which crew to me is usually up to the bottom of the calf. No, these these actually went up almost mid calf, if not a little bit higher. And I told Liz, I was like, holy crap, I'm glad we didn't get the boots. Those would have been like leg
Jeez.
come up over the knees.
Yeah.
So, but that is definitely a product that I will endorse. Um, Another product company called AOFAR, AOFAR. They sent me a rangefinder to test. It's 1,000 yard rangefinder with continuous scan, angle compensation, everything. It actually performed just as good as the Sig Sauer. It's not as bright as the Sig, but you're talking a $70 rangefinder compared to a $350 rangefinder.
Is that the one you saw on TikTok?
Yes,
I saw it. Yeah.
for
So,
70 for
yeah,
70
like
bucks.
69.95 or something like that.
Yes. So because they reached out to me and said, "Hey, if we send you one, will you do us a YouTube video?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, I'm going to do some testing on it first. So, but I put that on Liz's pouch and so yeah, so now she has her own rangefinder. It does have a dial on the eyepiece, so you can fine tune it to clear it up for your eyes. The continuous scan was really impressive because you just basically just sit there and hold it and just you can track something and it continually updates as it's scanning.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I mean, for somebody just getting into it or somebody that's on a budget, I would not hesitate to tell them to get the $70 rangefinder. I don't know about longevity. Um, it's actually quite a bit lighter weight than the Sig Sauer. So weight wise, kind of one there. Size comparison, it's about the same size. So um, what else did we test? Because we couldn't use the motorcycle and get the motorcycle trail, we did not get to use our Maven tents. We didn't get to do any spike camping, so we were a little bummed on that one. So, but gotta test some stuff. Test the reeds, test the socks, test the new that rangefinder. So I did get an email from Greg. He said they had a very interesting year over in their camp. Not a lot of bugling. A little bit in the morning, but they would just kind of shut up and it's like they weren't even interested in calls. So it kind of sounds like over on that side where he was that maybe the rut's a little bit later over in that area. So, but like I said, we're heading back up Friday. I have gotten reports that yeah, still some good bugling activity, still some good rutting activity. So there are pockets out there with rut activity in late rut zones. So for those of you that have rifle hunts that are coming out in the next week, or we'll call it 2 weeks, um, I would say revert back to just light calling, doing some, calf cow communications. If you are going to do bull vocalizations, just do raking, huffs, grunts, and whines. Create that curiosity. Also, too, I don't know if you guys have seen on social media, but I've been getting tagged in all kinds of videos on Instagram of multiple bulls that sound like red stags. They're just, they are so hoarse that they can't hit a high note because they have had so much bugling this year in some areas. I've seen more videos of that this year than I have in years past. So there have been some areas that there has been a lot of bugling and a lot of rutting activity. So that,
So the last call we did, I got to that high point where I could get some cell signal.
uh-huh.
I slept in my truck that night, and I don't know, 10 o'clock at night or something, I get out of my truck, take a leak, and I had about 30 elk 20 yards from my truck.
Yeah.
They did not appreciate my flashing them or something. They all took off, but they were 20 yards from that truck.
So what you're saying is you park the truck and camp right where the elk live.
I guess so, and I think I'm going there next year.
Complaining.
It's you can listen over it's right the edge of a ridge there, and you can just listen over the edge, and that's where they're bedding and feeding all day. It's an old clear cut that's got it's probably 15, 20 years old. So the timber is getting to 25 foot tall or something, but it's still fairly open.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of them in there. And the last night I was playing with a bull right there, same area, but I got about 75 yards and the wind swapped on me.
I did talk to my buddy that went back into the closure area as soon as they lifted it, because he still had his spike camp up on the ridge from that opening weekend. And he said he has never seen those roads going back in there tore up the way they were. And I was like, well, yeah, there hasn't been any traffic, so those elk have been having a heyday on those
Yeah.
roads. So I'm hoping that, because, well, we did find out too that he said, yeah, it was crazy, Michael. He goes, when I went in there was boot tracks. So people had been going into the closure area, and the group that was camped next to us, um, they were up near us. They pulled their trailers out that weekend that the fire really blew up, but they said they had trail cameras up on the upper road that were cellular cameras. And they said, yeah, there's a ton of activity on that road. They're seeing trucks come in at midnight, at 3 a.m. So people were sneaking in the cover of darkness, hunting in there. And Bryce and I were trying to wonder, we were like, God, I wonder where these guys are hunting. And they had showed us some pictures of bulls that they had. And we're like, man, that's really open. And so we were sitting there racking our brains. And I said, holy crap. I said, Bryce, they're still going into the coverage area or closure area. They're hunting up off that upper road. And sure enough, 3 days before the season ended, they got popped. They got ticketed. So, but here's the crazy thing: the ticket that they got, $185. Here the sign says up to $5,000 and or up to 6 months in jail. And Bryce and I were like, holy crap, if it was only $185, we should have been in there every freaking day, just like all the other people were.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would I would have gladly paid a $185 ticket to hunt the area that I had been scouting all stinking summer long.
But
Yeah.
you're thinking like me. I mean, other people can do that. I'd be the one hauled off to jail.
That's what Bryce and I said. We were talking about it that last night, and it's like, you know what? We still had a good year. we were still into elk and still into bugles every year. Look at how it forced us to learn this other new area that, um, even though if we're up in our normal camp, we can still jump in the side by sides and be over to that other area in 35, 40 minutes. So it gives us another area. And we didn't see a single person hunting in there. So because the road getting in ends up getting so overgrown with brush that you can't even drive back in there. If you look up off the road, it just looks like it's a brushy, gnarly mess, which it really isn't. If Let me back up. A good portion of it is, but you have portions that you can get around pretty easily. And we ended up going on another road and dropping down into the creek. It was 197 yards from the road we could drive in on with the side by sides. That's all you're going to take in there. But 197 yards from that road to drop down to the creek up to the other side of the old road. And then you had that old road system that you could work. Now, there were parts of that old road system that did really get brushed over, but it's like, but we were talking about that, and it's like, okay, you know what? We followed the law, we stayed out of it. Our elk isn't tainted because we didn't shoot it in a closed area. We actually followed the rules. And so, and I, we pulled the positives out of the season. And it's like, you know what? Next year, we just now have other areas, and we'll be back into our area. Like I said, Liz and I are heading up there this weekend for the spike camp or spike hunt, set up camp, because the following weekend, Knox has his rifle hunt, which we did go last night, and he has his first official deer tag and his first official elk tag. So I'm kind of torn on what to do on the spike hunt, just because I don't want to booger the area that they're gonna take him into. But nice thing is because this coming weekend it's just gonna be Liz and I. So it's like, okay, we're not gonna get too crazy because I don't want to get into a 5 mile pack out by myself. Because I learned on packing out Brandon's bull that I think my days of coming off the mountain with a hind quarter and a front quarter at the same time are just about done. It finally at 54 years old, the hind quarter, front quarter was pretty damn taxing on me. Got it off the mountain, made it, but it took me a while to recover. I was ready to go out on an evening hunt later that day, but it did. Yeah, it took a lot out of me. So the fact that it's just going to be Liz and I don't think we're going to be too crazy, because I know that's going to be multiple trips at 5, 6 miles with just myself. Nice thing is on Knox's hunt, Bryce and Brandon will be there. So between the three of us, we can get an elk off the mountain pretty easy in one trip. So um, I'm not going to say that I'm completely done with hind quarter and front quarter. Um, I'm just going to have to do a little more work in the gym over the next 11 months to get my body prepared for it. So um, another product that I did test is Super Beat 2X chews. Super Beats. So within our body, when we're younger, we produce a lot of nitric oxide. And what that nitric oxide does, it helps blood flow, it helps blood pressure, it helps stamina, it helps all of this. But as we age, we start producing less of it. Well, a good source to get that is beets. I don't like beets. I don't like
Uh,
the taste of them,
uh,
don't like the consistency,
I
nothing.
like it.
But Jim, these chews that I found on Amazon, they're super beet chews. They're from a company called Human N. You just chew two of them in the morning. Consistency, it's almost like eating a Starburst. And it has a little bit of pomegranate flavor to it. Um, I've noticed an increase in stamina. I've noticed an increase in mental clarity. Um, Liz is taking them also now. So we joke that now we eat Starburst for breakfast. So so but that's another product that I would recommend to people, and I can send links to some of these products if anybody's interested in them. So but that is the season recap. So archery is done. September always goes by way too fast. So I think Bryce and I have decided that next year, we've been talking about it the last few years. Next year, we're actually going to do it. That from now on, we're realizing that our number of Septembers are dwindling, so we're going to take advantage of it, and we're going to take 2 weeks off and hunt 2 weeks straight, because he was whining that he did not get a day off to stay in camp and rest one day because we were going. So now with the 2 days, we will be able to allocate him a camp day, so that way he doesn't become a boohoo baby too much. So okay, well, that's all I got, guys. So hopefully, yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and yeah, hopefully have some good reports about the spike hunt and Knox's hunt. So, okay. Any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, complaints?
I got nothing, I wasn't there, so.
Hey, I had a lot of fun. I lost 10 pounds, which was a good thing.
Ah, I beat
And,
you.
you know, it was a good year. I got into a lot of elk. I just never got a shot opportunity that never loosed an arrow. I came close a couple times, but
But
yeah,
you know
good.
what? You took time to enjoy the journey,
I did.
and
And I
that's
had a lot of fun.
that's the important thing, is just enjoy the journey and have fun. And by the way, I beat you. I dropped 15. So,
Oh, well,
but we're
good
we're
for you.
we're back in the gym now to start replenishing it. And God, do
Well,
I.
I figure, you probably earned it. You had to pack an elk off the mountain.
Yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't a bad pack. In fact, we got half the elk done, and I said, guys, I'm going to grab a front quarter and hightail it out of here, then grab the general and bring the general down the road and see just how close I can get it. Because the bull died in a small little meadow. This bull only went 40 yards from where Brandon shot, but died in a small meadow 151 yards up above the old road. Little did I know that part of that road that we were going to have to go through was pretty overgrown. um, Tough to walk through, especially when you have a quarter sticking up above your head and your bow sticking above your head. I got high racked on a branch a couple of times. I really wasn't sure if I was going to make it out of that. So, but yes, I did manage to get the side by side just a wee bit closer. So the final pack out with the hind quarter front quarter was only 768 yards. So, but it was still through that thick brush. Mr. Richard, how you doing? Welcome. I don't know if he's muted.
Yeah, there we go.
There you are.
Yeah.
I saw you popped on a little earlier before we got started, and then when we came in here and got going, you disappeared on me.
Oh, I wasn't sure. It said it would come on at 6, so I was a little early.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, usually we start about 7 o'clock Mountain Time, and we were actually just just wrapping up and just kind of talking about some of the shenanigans from the year. So, did you were you able to make it out? How was your season?
Yeah, I made it out. I hunted the coast
Okay.
here in Oregon.
Okay, I was going to ask if you were in Oregon or Washington. So,
Yeah.
chasing the ever elusive rosies in the fog and rainforest.
Well, we didn't have rain. I hunted the Tioga unit,
Okay.
and I got into them here and there, but I found that they weren't an- gosh, answering bugles,
Yep.
even in the dark. So I kind of went to the elk nut, kind of has that advertising, and I was doing
Yep.
like the raking and the low bull calls,
Yep.
and I'd get him to reply, but then I wasn't sure what to do after that. That was
Yeah,
my question, I guess, or
we were actually kind of talking about that. And in fact, I was talking to somebody about that last week. That it seemed like this year that if you had too much volume on your cow sounds or your bugles, if you had too much volume, they just didn't want anything to do with you. Um, but if you toned your volume down and just got nice and soft on the cow sounds and I was telling these guys that you could take your hand and you can put it on the end of your grunt tube and it kind of acts as kind of a baffle and it takes the sharpness and tones it down a little bit and then just use a little bit of air pressure that because that's when when I was doing all the calling I was just that nice and soft and that's what we were getting a lot of responses and call-ins on but then once Brandon tagged out and he became the caller Brandon's kind of all or nothing, meaning he doesn't get any sound out of the reed, or it is max volume because he's trying to reach elk in Pennsylvania from Idaho, and he's trying to cover all that country. And so that's why I was kind of giving him a bad time about learning some diaphragm control and volume control. So, but the one thing I can say that especially with Roosevelt in the thick country, um, the best thing to do is not necessarily call to them, but kind of create scenarios. You can do some soft cow calling, and then for your bull vocalizations, instead of bugling, just stay with raking and then some huffs and grunts. And what it does, it creates curiosity in those bulls because then all of a sudden, they know each other's voices. But if all you're doing is raking and huffs and grunts, all of a sudden they're like, man, who is that over there? Is that Fred? Is that George? Who is it? And a lot of times you can get that old adage that curiosity kills the cat. Well, curiosity kills bulls too because they want to come in and know who's over there, kind of doing that raking and huffs and grunts in their area.
well, that's what I was doing. Like for one instance, I went off the end of this landing, and I was probably there for at least an hour, and I was doing that. The low wasn't doing anything high volume.
Yeah.
Waited, and I'd take breaks, and it's like, nothing. Put my pack on, started walking about 20 yards, and all of a sudden this bull chuckles. But
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, now what do I do? And that's kind of where I ran into instances like that. It's like, okay, do I reply back? Do I go towards it? And then they talk about, well, you start with bull calls, you stay with bull calls. So
Well,
uh,
in that case too, it's kind of hard to because were you just doing bull vocalizations or did you do any cow vocalizations?
no, I didn't do any cows. I
Okay.
just strictly the bulls, the moaning and groaning and the raking
And that's
and
that's where all of a sudden you can introduce a cow and then start tapping your palm on the end of your grunt tube to represent glunking. And then all of a sudden that's where he's like, "Oh, well, I didn't realize you had ladies," and that's another way that you can kind of create that curiosity. And you talking about chuckling reminded me that guys, Santa Claus is alive and well. So we ran into him a couple of days. Um, we ran into a bull that we called Santa Claus because his chuckles were just ho 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 ho, just those three chuckles, and that's
Yeah.
all he would do with that ho ho ho. And in fact, we were all set up in different places, and when we got back together in the dark to hike out one day, you could tell something was up just with the demeanor of everybody. And then all of a sudden, Bryce goes, "Did you guys hear that really weird chuckle?" And then all of us were like, "Oh my God, Santa Claus is alive!" And we just started going off about it. And it's like, "Oh, he's running around in our area," and so we named him the Ho 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 Bull. So
Yeah, most of the ones they wouldn't come in, and but they would answer back either with a chuckle or just like a short, low bugle.
yeah. A lot of times in bull to bull communications like that, Richard, they'll kind of keep their distance. They're just kind of answering, going, "Yeah, I hear you. I'm over here. Stay where you're at." Especially if it's a bull that has a few cows, he really doesn't want another bull over by him because he doesn't want to lose his cows. And so if you get in that scenario next time, go ahead and add, some cow vocalizations into it. And you can do a little bit of cow and, cow and calf. Keep going with that huffs and grunts and raking, and then just add in that glunking a little bit. And so now you're kind of painting the picture with that guy that you're a bull that has a couple of cows. One's kind of maybe starting to come into estrus, and that's where that glunking comes into play. And then if you start to see that bull, or you hear that bull's intensity level, because his testosterone level starts rising, his intensity starts rising, now that kind of opens up the door to where you can match his intensity back. And that's where you can end up in those pretty good screaming fits to get to the point where all of a sudden that dude just blows your hat off and uncorks a bugle that you feel to your soul. And then you hear him coming through the brush like somebody's driving a VW Beetle through that brush coming your direction.
Yeah, yeah. It's only about well, I hunted it last year and kind of had the same situation, but I had another situation where I left the coast and went up in the Cascades just for a night to check out an area. Drove up the road, pulled into this little spur road, and I couldn't drive it, so I thought I'll walk. So I shut the door, get all my gear on, shut the door. I barely go just a little distance, and all of a sudden, it was dead silent out, and this bull lights off. He just chuckled back at me and I didn't even throw anything out there.
How
And
far was he?
um, I, I would say probably within 100 yards.
Okay, so he could have heard you walking a little bit and was wondering.
Yeah, I think he did because I just started walking up the road,
Yeah, in the
and
in the
I
dark.
never did see it. I kind of went back and forth with him, just doing a little bit of raking and all, but then he just kind of wandered off. But I think I found where he just tore the ground up, and it was a small tree.
Yeah.
But that was what threw me. It's like, okay, I got it going. Now what do I do? So I guess I can see that now.
Yeah, so once you get them going, that's where you kind of start ramping up kind of the intensity, kind of that excitement level a little bit. You don't want to jump up too high too fast because you don't want to intimidate them or overdo it. But as those interactions continue, you just kind of ramp up the excitement, ramp up the adrenaline level. Best way that I've described it in the past is think about building your campfire where you start with a small kindling, and then as the fire progresses, you start adding larger and larger chunks of wood on to get the fire bigger. and that's kind of what you're doing with your calling sequence. Now you just joined a few days ago, right?
I've been signed up on your thing for a few months. I just haven't.
Okay.
This is the first time I've got on with you.
Well, welcome, welcome. Have you gone through the videos in the online course?
No, not yet.
Okay. Once you get to calling sequences, you'll kind of there's quite a few videos in there on the breeding sequence, and you'll kind of see how kind of start small with that and then just kind of ramp that up. That breeding sequence is our number one go-to sequence, and we'll do it a couple of different ways. We'll do it as a silent routine where we don't have any bulls located, or we have a bull located and we'll slip in and then get the setup and start doing that sequence. And biggest thing is it's telling a story that you're a bull with a hot cow. And the other thing that we'll do with it too is we'll tandem call on it, where say like if I'm the caller, I'm focused on the bull with the hot cow, and then one of my hunting partners will, once I'm into it, 15, 20 minutes or so, they'll act like another bull that comes in on that hot cow, and then we start feeding off each other. And that tandem routine, man, we've taken a dead quiet forest and hit that tandem routine, and next thing we know, we've got 6, 7, 8 different bulls just screaming around us. But I know I know Paul really likes the breeding sequence also, but I think he more calls it the slow play. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and Paul and I have a lot of similar thoughts and similar approaches to calling, and yeah, biggest thing is finding out what that bull's hot button is. What's his mindset? What is he looking for? Um, and in the calling sequences, there's some videos on there on how you can unlock and uncover that information. And man, once you kind of find what that bull's hot button is, and then really focus on that routine, whether it's the breeding sequence or an inviting cow routine, or even a young bull that has a cow that he's just huffs, grunts, whines, some raking, and just almost acting like a teenager in the backseat of the car with his first girlfriend, and he's really not sure what to do. But those are those are some of the sequences that you can do. And biggest thing is, man, have fun with them.
Oh, I enjoyed it. It's just, and I hunt by myself, so I imagine that makes it a little harder. And I'm still learning. In all the years that I've hunted, when I first started archery, we didn't call. We just kind of chased elk around. So
Took
it's only been the last 10 years or so. And like last year, I found a road on the coast. It had some nice rubs, and I thought, well, there's got to be a bull down here. So I dropped off the side of the hill, and I was kind of doing the little sequence there, and threw in some cow calls, and one across the way just chuckled. I heard some limbs snap, and then he chuckled. I'm thinking, okay. I kind of chuckled back, and he went silent, and I waited, did a few calls, nothing. I said, well, he might be gone. So I went back up to the truck, drove down the road up the ridge that above him, and parked. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna walk down the road to see if I can find a place to drop off. Well, I didn't take the bow and I didn't take my camera, and that was the worst mistake because I got down the road a little ways and there was a little bend in a dead bush, and I took one step up and there's his 7x7 broadside
Oh,
feeding, and he was the one that chuckled at me.
oh,
And
um,
I got a picture of him. Somebody had taken later on in the season to take a picture of him. I think he was on private property or something. So the next day I go down in, dropped off about 600 feet, did the same little setup, Only I've got a curved bugle, so I was throwing the sounds up the hill, and I heard a limb snap. This other bull comes up from the bottom, perfect. I had a 20-yard shot. I mean, I could have dropped it, but when I pulled back, I'm standing there looking at him, not quite at full draw, not even looking through the peep sight, just staring at him. And I didn't have buck fever or nothing. It's like it's only been the second bull in my life since I've been archery hunting for probably 15 years that I've ever pulled back on. And I think that's kind of why. And he had short horns, and they were like blacker than the ace of spades just from rubbing the alders.
Yeah.
Little short thing, but nice.
Yeah.
It's like, well, but to me that made my year last year. I said, and this year I got into them. I could use that advertising and get them to call. If I did a locate, nothing. And it seems like my brother and my previous or coworker before I retired, they hunted up at Hoodoo, which is a ski area.
Yep. Familiar with it.
And huh?
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and they hunted down on the bottom, and they said they were being mobile, so they were carrying food with them and all, and they said they were asleep on the one side of this ridge that was open. It had been burned, and he said from 10 o'clock at night until about 3:30 in the morning, they were going at it, locking horns. Only maybe 150 yards from them all night long, so they couldn't sleep because I guess one bull had more cows and the other big one wanted them. But on the coast, nothing was happening.
Yeah.
It was like it was later.
Yeah.
So
You will. We kind of talked about that, kind of earlier. One of the guys that's normally in here, he sent me an email earlier that he wasn't going to be able to pop in tonight, but I mean, we were in elk and bugles every day on our hunt from August 30th all the way through to the end there at September 30th. But he just didn't have much in his area, and he's just he hunts the other side of the state from us, and you'll find that there will be pockets that will have peak rut earlier, some areas peak rut kind of later. I'm sure Greg is anxious to get on because remember when we did the hunt prediction and I chose the week thinking that we were going to have a normal rut this year, and for 85-90% of the areas that was the case, but there's still always that 10 to 15% that has a little bit later rut, and those are the areas that are having bugling activity pretty good right now. And so but yeah, so Richard, the fact that you're in them, um, the reason the advertising is effective for getting them to call back is because the advertising, it's a lower intensity bugle than what the location is, and as the popularity of elk hunting has grown, there's more and more people out there that are hitting the ridge tops, covering country and bugling. And so, really got to adjust kind of, what we're doing. And you'll hear me say this on quite a few of these live Q&As and also in the videos. It's, you got to ask yourself, am I calling like an elk or am I calling like a human? And I mean, we experienced it, up where we were. We could sit there and we could hear other hunters, especially when we were out fishing, looking for areas since we were locked out of our hunt area. Um, I mean, we sat there and we dropped the tailgate mid morning in one area and just listened. And God, three finger ridges that just consecutive right next to each other. There was a person heading up each ridge, and they were all doing the exact same thing. And I'm like, way to have originality, way to be aware of your surroundings. I never heard a single bull bugle, but man, those four individuals were they were screaming, flat out, full volume, max effort. Couple of them didn't sound too bad at all. So, but could definitely tell that they were people, and so that's why we've kind of morphed. I was kind of talking, Richard, earlier, that there was a couple of reeds that I was really testing this year from Bo Brooks and Hunt Riven. One was the Black Ice and one was the Stratus and or Stratum. I'm really impressed with those reeds. The tonal quality is really good. The control, and man, you can get soft. I mean, I was playing around with them, and I did some really soft cow calls that the guys I hunt with, that 20-25 yards away, they could barely hear it. But crazy thing is we'd have a bull light up across the canyon.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of realized that the softer calls, and because I figured it's just kind of like fishing. Everybody throws the same thing out there over and over. And like last year, I pulled up to this landing, and down in the bottom, this guy was hammering the bugle, and it sounded like he took a log and hit a tree. And I mean, just consistent. And I said, well, he ain't gonna get nothing that way. If anything, he's gonna chase them all out.
Yeah, then you start looking at OnX and figuring where their escape routes are and roll around to the backside and
Yeah,
catch them on there. So,
because all the ones I got into, they didn't have cows. It was about the second week of September, and then my brother got into them, or when they heard them, it was during the full moon.
yep. So they were rutting pretty hard at night in that bright moon.
Yeah, and then my last one was just about the Friday before the end of the season.
Okay. Yeah,
But
so if you're seeing just solo bulls or a bachelor group of bulls, we did a live Q&A 1st of August when we were talking about that, guys. Wasn't it about then?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
About then, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, Richard, what's going on is their testosterone level really hasn't raised up enough. And in that episode, we kind of talked about some things that you can do to raise their testosterone, and that's where I kind of touched on it earlier. Instead of calling to them or at them, just tell your story, and that's where introducing that cow with, the huffs, the grunts, the raking, the glunking, and just kind of moving around a little bit and paint that picture in their head that man, there is a bull with a cow right there by them, and that cow is kind of coming into estrus, and that's where you can kind of get them to raise up a little bit and come into you.
on the cows, would it be more of just plain mused, or kind of somewhat excited, or?
Yeah, you kind of start with just a few mews, and then as you start ramping up, you kind of get more excited on it. You
More
kind of get the kind of start getting some of that yaw, 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 dragging
Mhm.
out and adding an excitement. You can then start adding in kind of the buzz mew into it as you've kind of ramped up a little bit. Then, with your soft cow calls, you can mix in one or two that have a little bit more volume, that she's getting kind of a little bit more demanding with this bull, but he's really not paying the attention to her that she's wanting. I mean, he's kind of showing some rutting signs. He's glunking and he's huffing and he's raking, but just not to the extent that she's wanting. And that's where you kind of ramp those up, get a little bit more excited, a little bit more demanding. And that's where these bulls that you're calling to are all of a sudden, it's like, "God, this doink doesn't know what the heck he's doing. Screw it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to breed this cow since this guy can't figure it out."
Yeah, and a lot of it I can see it's just what do you call it? Encounters.
Yeah. In encounters, and the main thing when you kind of get into it, and even though in the online course there's those calling sequences, just remember on these calling sequences, it's not stick to the letter. It's you'll get a gut feeling because and then your situation and with that bull responding, and you just kind of start morphing and just like I said, have fun with it, but definitely be ready. And where you said you left the bow and went for a walk, I've been there. In fact, on that bull that I called in for Bryce, I had actually set my bow on the ground and walked over to the edge. I was 15 yards from my bow when that bull came in. And so that's why I just dropped off the back to call so that Bryce could shoot. So we've been there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've been there.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to wrap this up for tonight. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Richard, welcome to your first live Q&A. Tune in. So hopefully we'll see you again on future ones. So as I said, we will be back in 2 weeks on the 23rd and give you guys a report on this weekend's hunt and also Knox's hunt in 2 weeks. Hopefully we can get into a couple of those big boys we've had on camera now that the fire closure is lifted and Knox can punch his first elk tag. So
There you go.
I'll tell you what though, if that kid at 12 years old drops one of those 340s or 350s,
He'll be ruined for life.
Yeah, yeah.
That or hooked
Yeah.
for life.
Go get a lottery ticket too.
oh, I would be tickled pink
Oh boy,
if it happened.
that'd be
So
awesome.
yeah. So, all right, guys, as always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, though, have fun, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A. Enjoy, be safe, have fun, everybody.
Yep. All right.
Bye bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.